All right, welcome to the Sumer Sports Show. I think this is episode 93. We had a little bit of a problem there with the intro music, but we're here. We're actually in kind of one of our studios here at the Sumer Sports North, which is in Atlanta. I'm Eric Eager. I am your host today. We're going to go through your basically your review for the week. We're going to talk a little bit about the preseason. We're going to talk a little bit about the Green Bay Packers because I've been on a lot of shows this week to talk about Green Bay. We're also going to talk about what Ryan Clark said, which was that George Pickens is more talented than Justin Jefferson. And what does that mean for player evaluation? But first, I do want to talk about our sponsor for the show. This is we are sponsored by Circa and their Millions competition, as well as their Survivor competition. Next week, a few of us at Sumer will be in Vegas. Myself, Tej, Seth, and Parker Fleming will be there. We will be helping people sign up for the competition. We'll also be doing a few shows. We're also going to be, basically kind of promoting a few new shows. There's going to be some new podcasts on the network with people like Tej, Seth, like Parker Fleming, as well as Sean Syatt, people who have been really instrumental parts of what we're doing here at Sumer Sports. I'm really excited about that. And again, with Circa Sports, you can you have to play. You can have to sign up in Vegas, but you can play anywhere with that Millions competition. As well as the Survivor competition. So again, if you want to play those, if you want to do some predictions for the NFL season, go ahead. Meet us out there, have a good time. And again, you can work with a proxy there so that you can play anywhere. You don't have to actually place your weekly predictions from the state of Nevada or the city of Las Vegas. It'll be a good time. Come up and say hi, DM me on Twitter or what's called X now. And especially now that no one can get blocked anymore, you can go ahead and message me there. I think that it'll be a fun time. I'm looking forward to seeing some people I haven't seen since I was there last year at this time. It should be a good, enjoyable. It should be a good, enjoyable time. But again, circasports.com for more information. It's in my opinion, the best sports book in the United States of America. This has been an interesting week, right? Because we've gotten one game played already, right? Philadelphia and Cleveland tied last night. Another good performance by Tanner McKee. Another bad performance, I think, or kind of maybe a more along the line of what we've seen from Marcus Mariota over the past few years. But we saw Tanner McKee play well. Marcus Mariota, he would be like a $2 million dead cap hit should he be cut, and then I think another $3 million next year if the Eagles were to think about going with a different backup to Jalen Hurts with Tanner McKee, who my former colleague Mike Renner really did like coming out of Stanford this past cycle. He played really well. It was fun to see Dorian Thompson-Robinson play well as well. One thing to remember, though, when a guy like Dorian Thompson-Robinson flashes in the preseason is that he's a little bit older than everybody else, having played, he played about 5 years at UCLA, and he started almost all of that. So he's got more experience. He's going to be a little bit less raw than some of the other rookies, but still, nonetheless, very impressive and very much a what I can tell to be a better choice for the backup spot to Deshaun Watson than Kellen Mond, for example. And so he was fairly impressive there, which was good. Tonight we have, the Carolina Panthers going to New York Giants. Giants are about 3-point favorites if you look at Pinnacle. And then the Atlanta Falcons host the Cincinnati Bengals. In fact, the Bengals are just in town here in Atlanta. The Falcons are actually favored by 6.5 points if you look at Pinnacle. Again, if you are somebody inclined to do these things, there is a teaser that you can use tonight, which is Panthers up to 8.5. And the Falcons down to 0.5 point. I don't necessarily know if you want to tease down in a preseason game, basically a touchdown favorite down to just a pick 'em, but that's one to think about. And then on Saturday, we have Jacksonville at Detroit. So two cats that finished 9-8 last year, as predicted by me. Dolphins, Texans, Bills, Steelers, Chicago Bears, Indianapolis Colts, Tampa Bay Bucks, New York Jets. New England Patriots, Green Bay Packers, Titans, Vikings, Chiefs, Cardinals, Broncos, Niners, Raiders, Rams, and Cowboys, Seahawks. And then Sunday, you get Saints, Chargers. Again, for a lot of these, which is an interesting discussion topic, a lot of these pairings happen this week in joint practices. And so it'll be interesting to see. Chicago has already decided that they are not going to, play any of their starters because they saw everything apparently they needed to see in this week of practice, whereas some other teams are going to play. Kansas City, for example. Now, they didn't joint practice with Arizona, so they're going to play their starters this week. Maybe related, maybe not, but certainly an interesting slate of games. A lot of we talk about we don't really talk about betting a ton on this show, but there are some teasable lines and there are some totals that are low enough where teasers make some sense. So good luck if you're going to go out there. So the one thing I want to talk about this week. So first thing I want to talk about is this idea that a player so earlier this week, ESPN's Ryan Clark, the former safety for the Washington Commanders and Pittsburgh Steelers, said that George Pickens is more talented than Justin Jefferson. And while, obviously there was a lot of scorn there, and I think rightfully so, I think it's a ridiculous notion that somebody who has been one of the most efficient players in the NFL, one of the NFL players, however much you want to take this, voted him the second best player in the NFL this past year. I do think that there is an interesting discussion topic here, and it surrounds one of basically this idea that production doesn't always equal talent, and where do those things sort of intersect, and where is there some holes in the Venn diagram, or where does the Venn diagram not intersect for those two things? And so, I think the classic easy case is something like Jimmy Garoppolo, who, I believe is fifth or sixth since 2017 when he joined the San Francisco 49ers in expected points added per dropback. He's, a top 5 or 6 player in the NFL during that time. And I don't think anybody would say, especially, given how many great quarterbacks have even retired since then, that he was anywhere close to the 5th or 6th best quarterback during that time. So very clearly production, which is an application of traits, an application of talent, isn't always a great proxy for determining who is more talented. There's still like a little bit of a notion, here. And one of our normal listeners here, Sean, says, is talent being confused with potential in this instance? Yeah, but I still think we don't understand, potential really is just a distributional, it's a distributional notion that, your potential is also influenced by the distribution that your play is governed by. And we all, I think, would believe that Justin Jefferson's distribution, that median, is much, much higher than George Pickens is. And the question is Justin Jefferson's distribution so narrow that George Pickens, his ceiling is higher? And I sort of reject that notion, even if we accept that definition of talent as being sort of potential. I still struggle with that. And so there's a few things that you can do, I think, using data to strip it out. But ultimately, this is also a question, and this is where there is going to be substantial staying power, I think, in scouting, right? There's always going to be some value in a person who understands football and who understands, for lack of a better term, the assignment when it comes to evaluating what we're trying to understand in football. There's always going to be value in, a scout being able to put a grade on a player. We have some issues, of course, with that, but I think, again, Jimmy Garoppolo has been more efficient than players like Matthew Stafford. He's been more efficient than players, I'm trying to think of an even better name. Like even Tom Brady, you look at like yards per pass attempt is less than Jimmy Garoppolo, although EPA per play, I believe Brady is better over the last 6 years. I have to look at the numbers. Like there is value in being able to look at a player systematically and say, this one's better than that one. And then there's also value in looking at production, because production is ultimately what these evaluators are evaluated on. If Jadeveon Clowney just signed today with the Baltimore Ravens, first overall pick in the 2014 draft. I think people, believe Jadeveon Clowney is, quite a bit of a talented player. And yet the production, especially as a pass rusher, has not been commensurate with the perceived talent in the player. And hence, over the course of the last 3-4 years, Clowney has never really found a consistent home in the NFL. So production clearly matters, and people are paid on production. But we've seen a number of times where production doesn't necessarily, if teams are buying into production, they don't necessarily get it when players change teams or change schemes. So there's also very clearly this inherent talent that we have to unlock. And so I think that is, something where we as an analytics community, we have to understand that it's not always going to be, it's not always going to be as clean as saying, oh, this player had the best PFF grade this year, or this player had the best EPA per play per year, or this player had the most rushing yards over expected. Like, there's very clearly some gap between how good a player is and how productive they are. But then again, we are paid for production. So to me, it's an interesting. To me, it's an interesting dichotomy there, and I think obviously with Justin Jefferson, look, you're talking about a guy who has been historical in his first 3 years. Pickens had a pretty good rookie year with limitations at quarterback, but the gap there, and so and again, this is probably just a call maybe from me and from us as far as a community to just start the season, right? Because we're already sort of we've already permuted through all the possible arguments we could ever have about football. And now it's time to start the season. We got some comments here. I think from Ollie Karen, I think with these modern offenses, wide receiver production is extremely overrated when evaluating wide receivers. I think that's interesting. Sean says, how does somebody like Cooper Kupp factor in this conversation? Clearly productive and excels in the role, but might not thrive in different circumstances. I think this is the whole thing. I don't think anybody believes Cooper Kupp in 2021, when he was offensive player of the year in the NFL, was the most talented wide receiver in the NFL. Like, I don't think if a team got to choose from scratch which wide receiver they preferred, they would prefer him. Yet in that offense, in that situation, with that volume, with that opportunity, he was the most productive wide receiver in the NFL, and by a country mile in most cases. So, it's a good question. I think this is why, and I did this at PFF when we're doing it at Sumer. I think you have to be able to strip things down to their essence, and this is why things like stability matter so much. My friend Matt Harmon, he tweeted out today, the reception perception thing, where he's trying to get really down to the studs and be like, can this guy get open? Can he beat other players? And I think that gets more to the answer, right? Because he's not caring so much about catches, yards, and touchdowns, or even yards per route run. He's caring about getting open or not. But even then, it's about what routes you're running and what opportunities you get in an offense to be able to be, efficient. Again, I admire and will always support somebody who's trying to get more to the answer of how good a player is, because I don't think we've come close to solving that yet. Anish Gupta says people want talent to be size, 40 time, and vert. In reality, you have to consider quickness, agility, IQ. Yeah, I mean, look, Tom Brady, especially early in his career, was not anywhere close to the most talented physical quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he had great arm strength, at least at the beginning. But he processed things really well. He obviously led people really well, and leadership and processing ability and all the stuff that goes on between the years, that is a part of being a talented player. So I'm very much in thinking there. People want to talk about athleticism as talent, but this isn't track and field. This is football, and there are intangible things that some players have that others don't have, and that's what makes this thing hard. Ollie Karen says, for example, I think Terry McLaurin is a good as an elite tier, but has no quarterback and isn't fed the ball like Kupp or Jefferson by his play caller. Absolutely. So, and McLaurin, by the way, a darling of reception perception. In fact, I'm actually looking to another Commanders receiver. If I'm looking towards DFS, best ball, all that kind of stuff, I'm looking at Jahan Dotson for very similar reasons. Dotson played with Sean Clifford, who, while he's been impressive in Packers camp, was not a great college quarterback at Penn State, but continuously got open, tracked the ball well, and things like that. And will he get a chance in Washington to truly shine until they get a quarterback? Probably not, but will he be above expectation? In all likelihood, because of his ability there. Very good, I think, comments to that idea there as well. So it's an interesting topic. I would just say where we have to be careful, and I think where analysts earn their salt, earn their money, and where people are worth their salt is if you're a non-analytics person, non-stats person, and you throw out the word talent and you gussy it up in things like, oh, the intangibles and oh, this, that, and the other thing, to me, I don't think that kind of analysis is worth that much. Yet at the same time, I see other analysts, and it was an interaction I had with somebody on Twitter yesterday where I said, something like Trubisky, and I said something about Mitch Trubisky being a backup, and he said, well, he had a higher PFF grade than most people. And it's like, when you do that as a stats person too, you undermine the statistical, quests of people like me and people, in the analytics space. Like a player also isn't who their PFF grade was last year or last game. And you do have to be more nuanced about it. So the answer is somewhere in between, as it always is. And speaking of answers, I want to move on a little bit to the team that I have liked this entire offseason, and it pains me as somebody who grew up in Minnesota, somebody who doesn't like cheese, in large part because I don't like the taste, but I also, philosophically didn't like it growing up. And that's the Green Bay Packers. So the Green Bay Packers right now, when you look at them in the marketplace, the NFC North, if you look at Pinnacle Sportsbook, the Lions are plus 133, the favorite. The Vikings are plus 272. Again, when we say plus X, it means you spend $100, you get X if they win the division, for example. The Packers are at plus 365. Now, this number has gone from 5-1 to 4-1, and in Pinnacle, which is the sharper sportsbook, I think, Circa, Pinnacle, Chris, those sharper ones in the world, plus 365 for the Bears, actually. I'm sorry, and then the Packers on Pinnacle are actually the least favorite team to win the NFC North at plus 418. So this is a better number than where you can get at some of the other books as well. Previously 5-1, so they have gotten some money here. Win total is 7.5. This is the first time they've been lined with a win total of less than 500 since 2009, I believe. So this is a team that is being doubted substantially, and I think that they're being underrated, and a few different reasons why. I think, this is a great one. Sean Donahue, pour one out for the Rashawn Gary 25-1 sack leader ticket. I had a 50-1 on Defensive Player of the Year. I thought he had at least had a chance. Obviously, he tore his ACL mid last year and it didn't work, but he was very productive prior to that. When I look at the Packers, I see a lot of markers of a team that could outperform expectations. The first of which is I think their head coach is underrated. When Matt LaFleur took over Green Bay in 2019, they had a below 500 season in 2017 because of an Aaron Rodgers injury. 2018, Rodgers played the whole year, but he was banged up. If you remember that Sunday night game where he came back, sort of magically from an injury, but also, he came back and beat up on a Bears team, after trailing 20-0, a Bears team that would end up going 12-4. He came back in that game. The next week they tie against Minnesota. They have some games here. McCarthy kind of had some bad fourth down decisions and things like that in that season. They go 6-9-1, get McCarthy fired. The following year they go 13-3 under LaFleur. It was a little bit of a Mickey Mouse 13-3. I know my friend Aaron Nagler will tell me to shut the hell up when I say that, but it was a close win team. And Aaron Rodgers was still not necessarily as productive or efficient as he had been in the past. And so the Packers in 2020 traded up for Jordan Love in round 1. And we all know what happened after that. Aaron Rodgers colored between the lines for the next 2 years, won 2 MVPs, Packers won 13 games in both those years, especially 2020. That was a very good Packers team that won 13 games. No Super Bowls, no conference titles, nothing like that, but still it's great teams. And then last year kind of fell apart. Rodgers had been doing a lot of extracurriculars and all that kind of stuff, and it didn't work out. They went 8-9. They could have made the playoffs, but the Lions swept them, including beating them on week 18 in Lambeau to keep them out of the playoffs. And obviously Aaron Rodgers is gone, and now Jordan Love is their quarterback. And Matt LaFleur, to me, that whole timeline to me screams, this is a great player in Aaron Rodgers. But it also screams to me, this is a coach that has gotten a lot out of Aaron Rodgers. Again, Rodgers had played so poorly in 18 and 19 that they had drafted his replacement. And Matt LaFleur was able to get Aaron Rodgers to play within the confines of that offense well enough for them to be very good in 2 years. And I think that is being underrated in the marketplace. I think the other part is, and I'm going to talk about Jordan Love in a second because I want to sort of give a long diatribe into why, again, my self-scouting and my own evaluation of players leads me to sort of fade an opinion I had in the past. The defense for the Packers. So going into last season, 2022, they were coming off a 2021 season where Rasul Douglas had 6 interceptions, very good off the scrap heap. Devondre Campbell, similarly uncoveted player, got first-team All-Pro. Thomas Dimitrov, my co-host for the show on Mondays and Wednesdays in the fall, drafted Devondre Campbell, very good player, but kind of miscast at the end in Atlanta, miscast in Arizona, goes to Green Bay, wins, a first-team All-Pro, as I said. Rashawn Gary, then they go and draft Devontae Wyatt. They draft Quay Walker, both out of Georgia. And everybody's saying, well, look, this Packers team might take a step back offensively without Devontae Adams. But they're going to be great defensively. And that didn't materialize. In fact, Joe Barry gets a lot of flack for how that didn't work out. But you could see some of the seeds of what was going to be my bullish case here, which is that Walker played really well down the stretch. Wyatt is, a young player who's going to be playing next to Kenny Clark. I think sometimes we are a year ahead on defenses. And I think that's where the Packers are going to have more success this year than they had a season ago, is on that defensive side of the ball. So I think Matt LaFleur, good defense, not great defense, but a good enough defense, especially in the NFC, to have some success. And then when I look at Jordan Love is the type of player that historically my numbers hated. And I'm going to pull up an article from Pro Football Focus that I wrote in 2020 where I said, 2020 NFL draft, why there isn't value in taking Jordan Love late in the first round. And there's a number of different ways to look at that. Jordan Love is basically like a college football average quarterback in 2019. He was much better at 18, but once you took away some of the structures around him, he was not particularly good in 2019. And yet, he has a lot of the markers, a few different markers of the type of quarterback that I miss on. And going back to Josh Allen, going back to Justin Herbert, like there's a famous tweet out there. Like, I have a service that deletes tweets after a long time because that's a professional thing. But there's a tweet that I like to screenshot. And when I give talks to colleges or something like that, I always say, look, like we're in the get it right 55% of the time business, not get it right 100% of the time business. And I watching the Wisconsin-Oregon Rose Bowl in 2019 said, I don't think Justin Herbert's a first-round quarterback. I was, of course, wrong. But when you looked at his production and you looked at that of Jordan Love, it was very similarly declining from the early stages of their college career to their final year. And I thought that was a bad thing. Ultimately, Herbert has proved me wrong. He's got robo quarterback type talent. He's got, I think really good process ability. I think he obviously is one of the top, however you want to put it, top 8 at the very least quarterbacks in the NFL. Most people would say top 5. He's a very good quarterback. And the statistics would have told you, look, there's a guy that throws underneath. He's a guy that the offense is helping out, all this kind of stuff in the college data that was clearly, not something that was telling us his true talent to the point at the very beginning of the show. And I think Jordan Love has similar things. Now, we watched Jordan Love play. He's very clearly got the arm talent. He's very clearly physically gifted. But when I watch him, I see a guy that's going to color between the lines. And The biggest tension when I watch the Green Bay Packers over the past 3 seasons is how well they can play when Aaron Rodgers submitted to the offense and hit his back foot and threw the ball on time. And when especially in 2020 when Robert Tonyan was there and when obviously Adams was at his best, but they were running a lot of like play action. He was really like hitting that back foot, throwing the ball. That offense was very good. And, over time, even in 21, even though he won the MVP, I still think obviously his efficiency and all that went down. And then 2022 is sort of like where he just didn't trust the offense. And I sort of think about he's an artist, whereas I think Jordan Love will color between the lines. And I think when you look at Love and the situation he's in, he's got a modest contract for a player who, is a first round pick and that kind of thing. He didn't, like I said, it's a modest contract insofar as they basically gave him the 5th-year option with less guarantees. So he's got something to prove. And I don't think he's going to prove that thing by being the next coming of Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to prove that thing the same way Daniel Jones proved it last year, or the same way, that a guy like Kirk Cousins proved it last year, where if the guy colors between the lines with the talent that Christian Watson has, Luke Musgrave, the nephew of Bill Musgrave, the former offensive coordinator for a few different offenses in the NFL, former backup quarterback, as well as won a Super Bowl with the Niners. Romeo Doubs, obviously Aaron Jones, a guy that we really like in fantasy, A.J. Dillon, who is kind of the Leroy Hoard of that offense. I think that Jordan Love can be an effective enough passer in the structure of that offense for the Packers to exceed market expectations this year. What do I mean? I said this last week. I think it's a decent bet that the Packers will make the playoffs. I think it's a decent bet that they'll win the division, at least at those numbers. Like I said, plus 418. So you bet $100, you win 418 if they were to win the division. And to go over 7.5 wins. I think that I think that is the place if you're looking for undervalued teams in the NFL. We talked about this last week when I was doing some predictions. There's not really an undervalued team in the AFC. You can think about the Broncos, but I don't know. The prices are kind of converging there. In the NFC, it's a lot of like bad teams / teams that are better than bad, but everybody knows are that way, like the Philadelphia Eagles, the San Francisco 49ers, Dallas Cowboys, even like Detroit and Seattle. And so I think you got to look towards the teams where they make you they give you the icks a little bit, like some of those teams. And the Packers are a team that give me the icks a little bit, but there's so much there at the market prices that they have where I think that they could possibly be a spunky team this year. So again, and this is something where, the young analysts that watch the show, obviously one thing I always talk about, and it's going to be a big part of my book, Football Analytics in Python and R, is mentorship. The biggest mentorship thing I can give a young analyst, especially in the analytics community, is learn where you're weak and be able to pivot off of where you're weak. So again, I made this article way back in the day that I didn't think Jordan Love was worth the first round pick. And after all these years, I actually think he is undervalued in the marketplace. So again, that's my Green Bay Packers love. That's kind of what I want to talk about a little bit there. Sean Donahue, a good story here. He said the Athletic Football Show, so that's Nate Tice and Robert Mays, said that Rodgers is openly rebelling against that offense last year. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And like Aaron Rodgers can do that because he's got all the money. And Green Bay was, after he won 2 MVPs, Green Bay was incredibly desperate to sort of have him in the fold. But that is not what the luxury Jordan Love has. And what I like about Jordan Love is that he's the desperate one here. And when you have Matt LaFleur who knows what he's doing, very good in-game play caller, a very good everything in-game decision for Matt LaFleur last year. I think he had the best win probability added on 4th downs other than Nick Sirianni last year in the NFL. The timeout issue is Rodgers, of course. Like, I think Matt LaFleur is very underrated. I think he'll do some things with Jordan Love this year that are going to be positive, and as a result, I think the Packers are going to surprise people. They are 2.5-point underdogs week 1 in Chicago. That game, if you've watched Twitter all off season, is going to be an all-out brawl between two fan bases that hate each other and two teams that both think they're the next up-and-coming team. I have a feeling that one of those two teams is going to be good, and if I had to put my money on it, I'd say Green Bay. Before we close, again, this is gonna be a quick one. I'm in the office today. We had a few meetings, and so I had to start late. I'm gonna end a little bit early. I want to talk to people a little bit about what we're cooking up at Sumer Sports, because we've done an update to our website, which has been really cool, and we're going to do actually more updates to the website in the future here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys our website here, Sumer Sports. Again, we have some divisional previews, NFC East. We look into offensive diversity with Tay Seth. We have an AFC East divisional preview and so forth. Let me actually shrink this down a little bit so that we can see a little bit more of this. You can obviously find the podcast here as well. But a few things I want to alert you to. Firstly, we have the league page here, which will actually tell you kind of where all of these sort of simulations are. So if you want to look, for example, at the Green Bay Packers, we make the Green Bay Packers 8.2 wins, again, when their market value is 7.9. We put their division title odds at 27.4%. 4-1 is an implied of 20%. So there's an edge there to be had if you want that there as well. A small chances to obviously get a bye, conference title, Super Bowl, all that kind of stuff. And then you can also look at strength of schedule, which I think is really cool. 1505 is the average ELO in the NFL. We have the Packers kind of in the top third of the league, kind of tied with the Bears for in terms of schedule and so forth. So a very good tool here for you to look at. This will update every single week throughout the season. We also have players, and right now we just have quarterbacks. We're kind of like feeling this thing out a little bit of EPA per play type of stuff. We have scramble rate, sack rate, ADOT. Again, like I said, Jimmy Garoppolo, EPA per play last year, second in the NFL. No one would say that he or Tua Tagovailoa, for example, are two of the three best quarterbacks in football, but they are really productive. We have things like average depth of target. We have things like sack rate. We have things like passing touchdowns, interceptions, yards per attempt, rushing touchdowns, and things like that. Throughout this offseason, we will have more. So, before the season starts, we will have things like rushers. We will have things as receivers, defensive players, and so forth. We'll even have team pages as well. We just want to give you a little bit of a flavor for this before we put it all out into the open here. We also have, and this is going to be really fun, this is where we're partnering with Brilliantly AI. Our friend Savanch is working on this, but this is going to be a start-sit tool that leverages large language models. And so if you want to come in and say, hey, week 1, I want to know whether or not I'm starting Davante Adams or Cooper Kupp, it'll tell you, obviously, if you have both of those players on your team, you should start both of them, but it'll tell you who's projected to have more fantasy points and so forth. So check out this space for opportunities in the future to play with LLMs and to interact with us here at Sumer. So that's the new SumerSports.com, where we'll have a lot of stuff for you as we move forward here. Next week, like I said, we're going to be in Las Vegas. We're going to do a couple shows there. I think I'm going to be doing Gil Alexander's show. I'm going to be doing former NFL quarterback Sean King and his show along with and so it'll be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that. We are also going to debut new podcasts. So everything so far here has been under the Sumer Sports Show with Eric Eager and Thomas Dimitrov, that umbrella. But we're going to have 2 new branded podcasts with Tay Seth, Sean Syed, as well as Parker Fleming. So if you've enjoyed them on this podcast feed, they're going to have their own podcast feed coming up. So I'm really excited for that. So a lot of cool things coming up in the future. Like I said, if you are going to be in Vegas next week for signing up for those competitions with Circa Sports, come hang out with me. I'll throw you a shirt and a hat. We have some Sumer swag there, so it should be a good time. I'm going to be on Tim Murray's show as well. It'll just be a fun time. I'm really enjoying this. I'm really, when you're in this business and you're building products all summer, getting ready for the season, whenever anybody's like, oh, there's only 20 days till the season, I get kind of nervous. And now I'm sort of past that nervous point. and more towards the excited for football points. So, yeah, like I said, abbreviated show today, but I really wanted to talk a little bit about talent. I wanted to talk about the Green Bay Packers because I'm really a big fan of them. That's going to be, I think, my Restore the Roar team this year. It's funny, everybody, when I go on shows now, they're like, oh, you predicted the Lions last year, as if I predicted like the 08 market crash or something. So a lot of fun. Football is very fun. I can't wait till next week. We're going to have college football for the first time next week, and we're going to have the NFL in just 3 short weeks. So for Eric Eager, this has been episode 93 of the Sumer Sports Show. Have a great weekend, everybody.